Hey guys, Mr. Ridgway here. So we are going to be starting officially now on our next unit, which is going to be World War One and also World War Two. And with that, there's going to be some very interesting things we're going to talk about. At least if you've enjoyed, stuff so far. With that, I want to kind of remind you about a couple of things. Number one, just let you know about a couple of things. Number one, do not expect this to be a entirely comprehensive history of World War One or World War Two when we get to it. There's simply so much stuff there that we don't have time to hit absolutely everything. And then part two to that, which is also related, is don't expect there to be a ton of military history in these lessons. There will be some, but we're not going to go look at like this army moved to this place and et cetera, et cetera. If you really want to get into that, you can take a military history class. But for our purposes here, we want to understand the context of in this case, for this lesson, the actual context of what caused World War One, and then some other things. So conceptual knowledge matters. So what I would like you to do here, okay, on Pear Deck, just for your warm up, is to then say, or to write, what do you know about World War One? There is no right answer to this or wrong answer to this. Just what do you know? And once you've done that, you type that in. You can go on to the next lesson. Okay, so let's go ahead and talk about what our objectives are here first. So for this unit, our mapping that we need to do is of Europe. So we'll talk about that here in a second. But today we're mostly going to focus on the causes that are going to lead to the outbreak of World War One. If we get some time, we'll look at kind of what life is like for soldiers on the Western and Eastern Front. But mostly we're going to be focusing on the causes that are going to get us to the point where we get the First World War, as it is called. So our mapping, as I mentioned there, for this unit is Europe. And yes, we need to learn the states of Europe so that way we don't have this. But let's talk about how we're going to do that. So just like we have in the past, you have two options. You can do a Google Slides puzzle. The template is right there. And again, you take a screenshot of slide 5 or slide number 9, and you turn that into Schoology as evidence that you've learned where the certain countries are in Europe. Or, you can go with the memorize option, which again is always an option. The app is there for Europe. All you need to do for that is take a screenshot that you have mastered 20 of the 50 words into your long-term memory. Once you've done that, then you're good. Okay, and we can get on to the causes of World War One. Okay, so what is going to get us to fighting the First World War? It's going to seem extraordinarily complicated in some ways, but in other ways, maybe we should have seen it coming with some of the things that we're going to talk about. So our essential questions here, we're going to look at number one, what causes wars to begin? And then mostly this is a question for next lesson. We're also going to look at what kind of technology is going to affect the way World War One is fought. Just something I want to kind of put in your brain right now for you to store for later. So once you've gotten those written down, you can continue on with me. So I'm going to go ahead and just straight up tell you what the first, the first slide here, what the three main causes of World War One are. The first is going to be the long legacy that we have now looked at, because we looked at imperialism, of empire building. And also to go along with that empire building, alliances that have formed. Two is going to be some of the cultural backgrounds that are going into World War One, and this is stuff that's like cultural competition and social Darwinism and some other things we'll talk about. And then number three is the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand himself. So let's very quickly get to it. All right, let's talk about empires and alliances and all this jazz. By the time that we hit 1914, which is the year that World War One will break out, Europe has been on a mad rampage of conquering the globe. They've literally conquered or colonized 80% of the Earth's land surfaces by the time the 1914 hits. And along with that, because all of these empires are competing with one another, many of them have signed treaties saying, like, if this person attacks me, you'll come to my defense, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And there's a lot of tension here, again, with all of these, all this kind of competition and alliance building. And there's the possibility, if something were to happen, that a domino effect could occur. Like, I punch Steve, which causes Steve to bump into Stacy, which you kind of get the idea, right? And also, again, we saw this last lesson. If we just look at Africa, like it's been just even Africa as an example. That's not even counting all the colonization that's happened in Asia. It's been so heavily colonized, and there's been so much competition that this is certainly going to be a source of tension here. The next part then gets us to the culture that's kind of around this competition, and why they kind of Europe is kind of on edge so much. It has to do with a couple of developments in the way that Europeans, and to some extent the United States, have thought of themselves at this time. So if we just take the colonies out of the equation, there's been a few big cultural movements that have happened right around the turn of the 19th century, or well, 20th century. And the first is something called scientific racism, which I will go ahead and define for you very quickly. It's the idea that genetically, racially speaking, my group of people is more superior than yours, which, if you kind of think about the logical extension of that, you can kind of see where, for example, like Hitler might get some of his ideas with his final solution on the Holocaust. The other thing that we actually have mentioned, this other development before, is the rise of nationalism. Like the idea of like, my nation is superior. My nation, I have extreme loyalty to it, and it's better than yours. And there were all sorts of ways that nations are measuring their superiority to one another. It could be in their weapons, it could be in their economies and their cultural achievements. It's just this idea that Europe is kind of on this quest to see who can constantly keep one-upping each other, and that's going to have a profound effect on how countries relate to each other during this time. So, without looking back, don't cheat it. Summarize in a couple sentences what you just learned in the last couple of slides. This is a really, really good thing to do, because this forces your brain to do retrieval, which is what you do on quizzes and tests. So, no look backsies. Go ahead and sum it up. Once you did that, go on to the last slide with me. And then this is going to bring me to cause number 3, and what most people will point to as the actual events that get us then to World War I. It is going to be the assassination of that dude right there to the right. Okay, so that man right there is Franz Ferdinand, and he is the Archduke. He's like the heir to the throne of Austria-Hungary, okay, which is a country that's not around anymore. You can imagine it's Austria and Hungary smashed together. He is the next in line to the throne of Austria-Hungary, and he is going to get killed, okay, assassinated by the man just below him. His name's Gavrilo Princip. You don't need to know him. Just know that he is part of a Serbian extremist group called the Black Hand. Okay, so what's happened here? Okay, a Serbian has killed the next in line to the throne for Austria-Hungary. Okay, and if you understand that, that's the first place to kind of start. Again, to start with that basic fact. So if we take just that, and then we kind of layer on, obviously, a lot of anger about this. Okay, again, this person being next in line to the throne is like, somebody killing the vice president today. Austria-Hungary looks at Serbia and gives Serbia this ultimatum. Okay, and an ultimatum basically is, do these things or there will be war. And the reason why they go to Serbia and say this is like, take care of this Black Hand group, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And this, you can read the ultimatum. I've linked it here for you there if you really want to check it out. The demands, the 10 demands that it makes of Serbia is super unrealistic. And Serbia is like, no, we're not agreeing to these. Now, obviously, Austria-Hungary, being quite angry about this, wants to declare war on Serbia. So Austria-Hungary goes to their best friend, Okay, and that is Germany. And Germany gives Austria-Hungary what is very famously called the blank check. And if somebody hands you a check that has their signature on it but has no money written on it, it basically means you can do whatever you want. And that's exactly what Germany says to Austria-Hungary. We'll back you up, you go for it. And surprise, surprise, Austria-Hungary declares war on Serbia. Okay, so a good idea right now is you're kind of like writing like a chain of events, right? So Austria-Hungary, their next in line gets killed by a Serb. So Austria-Hungary declares war on Serbia. And again, Germany tells them, you can do whatever you want to. Go for it. We got your back. Okay. So let's take a moment here before I get going on here too much ahead of myself. I just have a very simple map here of the alliances at this time. So if we look, we have the green and red. We'll get to what those are here in a second. Do you see any problems for Germany and Austria here if war, let's say, were to happen to break out between these two different alliances? And we'll kind of specifically focus on Germany. Do you see any issues that might be for them? If you said they're surrounded, yeah, you got it. This is going to be a problem that Germany's going to run into here real quick. So let's talk about how that happens. Gearing up for war. Wouldn't you know it, Serbia, who's now been declared war on, has an ally, and that is Russia. Okay, Serbia and Russia, if you want to know why they had an alliance, it's because they're both Slavic peoples. They traditionally had been aligned in many ways. And Russia is led by that man right there, Tsar Nicholas II. Okay, and Russia, seeing their friend getting beat up here, starts to mobilize. And mobilize means like you're gearing up for war. You're starting to get men and material ready. You're getting armies arranged and moving and mobilizing, right? And when Russia starts to do this, this throws Germany into an absolute panic. Because Germany, simply put, didn't think that they would that Russia would take this step. They hadn't calculated their the odds on that. The other reason why the German high command here freaks out is because if Russia starts mobilizing and Germany and Austria-Hungary have to go to war with them, Russia is also allied with France. And back there on the map, okay, and I'll go back here just so you can see it, this is going to cause a problem because that all of a sudden now means that Germany could be fighting a two-front war. And Germany does not want to do that. That was not what they thought they had signed up for. And truth be told, Germany thought, and eventually the Germans thought that there might have been war with France, anyways, and they did not want the Russia thing to come into the equation. The Germans wanted to be able to mobilize first and kind of have control of things, and now Russia mobilizing has thrown everything out of whack for the Germans. Okay. So let's take a look here very quickly on what are going to be the two sides in this conflict, or what are very quickly going to be the two sides. So over here, okay, we have what's going to be soon called the Triple Alliance, which is Germany, Austria-Hungary, Italy / the Ottoman Empire, because Italy drops and switches sides halfway through. It's called the Triple Alliance because the Ottoman Empire is in there, but the Ottomans are a fading power at this point. Doesn't really matter. Okay, so the Triple Alliance, that's them. And then over here, we have the Triple Entente. It's French, so it's Entente. And that kind of tells you who's going to be on this side. We have France, who we just mentioned, Russia, at least for the first half of the war, and then eventually Britain, and we're going to talk about them, and then also one other group who I'm sure is not going to be important at all, the United States. Notice also I have a third group down here, and that is going to be Serbia, who's going to very soon be dead, and then also Belgium, who is also very soon going to be dead for reasons that we're going to get into. Okay, so I would make sure at least you know these two sides and probably the major powers that were on each particular one. So let's do a little recappy poo, okay? And I will stop us kind of here where my little mouse is, because this is our recap, okay? So, because I know this can be confuzzling, let's take a moment. Okay, the heir to the throne of Austria-Hungary has been shot. That means that Austria-Hungary is going to declare war on Serbia, because again, it was a Serb who had done this. Austria-Hungary backed up by Germany. Okay, yes. Russia, though, is friends with Serbia, and that means that Germany and Austria-Hungary are like, oh crap, we're going to have to go to war with them now too. Germany, looking at the situation, knowing that Russia has also signed a treaty with France, is now in a very difficult predicament, and is potentially going to be fighting a two-front war, and inevitably probably will. So here's now that we've now caught up to where we are. So everything below my mouse over here is going to be new. Germany's looking at this, and they make a decision. They decide they are going to attack France first and try to basically sucker punch them and knock them out of the war before Russia can finish mobilizing. That's the plan. And the way that Germany does this is they kind of, you can see a little arrow there, they kind of arc their way down through Belgium, which is right here, okay, into France. Problem though, Belgium has signed a treaty with Britain, and that's going to bring Britain into the war on the side of France and Russia. And so now we have our triple entente. Okay, and World War I now is officially going. Okay, with that, there's a skit here. I'd like you to watch it that summarizes everything I talked about, and then you can go on with me to the next slide. So our activity here that's coming up next is designed for you to take a moment and to actually, create something that shows that you know how World War I breaks out. So because the story is such a complicated, in some ways, chain reaction of events, you are going to create the story of how World War I breaks out as if it were a high school fight. So my students in the past have always loved doing this. You can have a lot of fun and creativity with it as long as you keep it appropriate. But there's only really two rules you have to do with this. Each country that is going to be in the story is going to be a student. So you'll give them a name. We'll see that here in a second. And then second, the second rule is you have to echo as many actual historical themes and events that actually happen. So like the alliance system, or different countries saying, well, if you do this, then I have to do this, et cetera, et cetera. So you can read my glorious sample right there, which I have incorporated all the relevant teenage lingo that I expect you to use. I would tell you to just channel your inner 8th grader who's texting through Snapchat about what happened when you write this. So you get to write your story right here, and I'll go ahead and show you this, and I will kind of talk you through it. You basically just fill out the slide. So we've got our introductory slide that just kind of here is going to show you the different sides. Okay, as it tries to load. There we go. And then down below here, okay, you're going to give each country a name. And then over here to the right, you get to actually write your story. And I really look forward to seeing what you're going to make. I'm sure it's going to be awesome. Now, in terms of submitting this thing, you don't need to submit your story online. We'll have you guys share them out in class, and I'll show you a mechanism that we're going to do with that. So don't worry about that, guy. But, okay, if we keep going on here, okay, actually, do I want you to submit them? Let me go back and look here. Yeah, actually, you know what? I think I do want you guys to go ahead and actually submit them. I'm gonna go ahead and change my mind. I'll just call an audible here. Yeah, go ahead and submit them on Schoology, and I will make sure that I leave a space that you can actually submit your writing there. All you need to send to me is the second slide. So this guy right here. Okay, so what had happened was, give me your story. Okay, again, just keep the language PG-13. Keep it appropriate. Although I do love seeing your guys' teenage lingo. Anyways. To end the block with the limited time that we have left, and there's space on your notes from the mini lesson for you to do this, I'd like us just to take a really brief moment and describe what soldier life in World War I was like. So I've got some, just kind of general sources and some things for us to kind of examine here. We're going to get into more about what combat was like in World War I in our next lesson. But if you click these, there's 3 points of interest here. If you're doing this on Pear Deck, these should still be clickable. Please don't do the one that's a choose your own adventure story. If that one's available, we're going to save that for next lesson. But I've got 3 things here, one on poison gas, one on trench life, and then one on Americans in World War I. And I'd just like you to take these things, and on your notes, there's 3 boxes there. And I'd just like you to summarize in a couple sentences what you learned about what being a soldier in World War I was like. Adjectives are always helpful here for describing things. And then also there's spaces in those boxes where you can add pictures for clip art, which is always a good idea. So once you've done that, you have completed our lesson. And I look forward to seeing you next time when we get to talk about what happens with combat in World War I. So see ya.